The big meeting room was full of strange beings. Some breathed gas instead of air, others looked like living rocks. A few were made of pure energy that glowed and moved like fire. All of them were angry, and all of them were angry at the same thing. Humans. Jake Morrison stood at the speaking area in the middle of the room. He had been Earth's main speaker to the galaxy for 12 years. He was getting old now, with gray hair and lines on his face, but his eyes were still sharp, and his voice was still strong. Today, he needed both. The room was huge, big enough to hold speakers from 47 different worlds. The walls were made of some kind of metal that changed colors. The air smelled like flowers and chemicals mixed together. It was not a place where humans felt comfortable, but Jake had learned to live with it. The humans have gone too far this time, said Chancellor Vextari. She looked like a giant snake with arms and a crown on her head. Her voice made a hissing sound when she talked. They have taken land in the Kepler area that does not belong to them. They have broken 17 different agreements. Jake's helper, Lieutenant Commander Lisa Grant, whispered something in his ear. She was young and smart, and she had been working with Jake for 3 years. She knew how to read the mood of the room better than anyone. Right now, her face looked worried. We have done nothing wrong, Jake said in a calm voice. All of our settlements follow the rules that were agreed upon. We have papers to prove it. Papers, laughed a voice from across the room. It came from Counselor Thrax, who looked like a giant bear made of metal. Humans always hide behind papers. But what about the spirit of the law? What about keeping peace? Jake had heard this argument before. Every time humans built something new, every time they found a better way to do things, someone complained. The galaxy was old and set in its ways. Most of the alien races had been doing the same things for thousands of years. They did not like change. The spirit of the law, Jake repeated. You mean the spirit that says some races can expand and others cannot? The spirit that says humans must ask permission for everything? You are a young race, said Supreme Arbiter Kellangoff. She was the leader of the whole council, and she looked like a giant crystal that could talk. Her voice sounded like music, but cold music. You have been in space for less than 200 years. We have been building this galaxy for 10,000. And in those 10,000 years, how many wars have there been? Jake asked. How many races have gone extinct? How many problems have never been solved? The room went quiet. Jake knew he was walking on dangerous ground, but he also knew that someone had to say it. The galaxy was not the peaceful place that the council pretended it was. There were always fights, always problems, always races that could not get along. The humans bring chaos, said Dr. Calandra from the Centauri delegation. She looked like a tall, thin person with blue skin and 4 arms. Wherever they go, things change. Change brings trouble. Change brings progress, Jake said. We have helped stop 3 wars in the last 5 years. We have shared our medical knowledge with 12 different races. We have built trade routes that benefit everyone. For a price, hissed Chancellor Vextari. Humans never do anything for free. You always want something in return. Jake almost smiled at that. It was true that humans liked to trade. They liked to make deals that helped everyone. But that was better than the old way, where stronger races just took what they wanted from weaker ones. Yes, we trade, Jake said. We believe that when everyone benefits, everyone wins. Is that wrong? It is not the way things are done, said Counselor Thrax. You upset the balance. You make races think they can have more than they deserve. There it was. The real problem. The council liked the galaxy the way it was, with everyone in their place. The strong races stayed strong, the weak races stayed weak, and nobody rocked the boat. Humans had come along and started teaching weak races how to be strong. They had started showing everyone that there were better ways to do things. Furthermore, Counselor Thrax continued, your military is growing too fast. You build too many ships, train too many soldiers, you make other races nervous. We build ships to protect our people, Jake said. We train soldiers to keep our colonies safe. If that makes you nervous, maybe you should ask yourself why. The room erupted in angry sounds. Some delegates hissed, others roared, and a few made noises that hurt human ears. Jake stood in the middle of it all, waiting for them to calm down. Lisa Grant touched his arm. Sir, maybe we should try to smooth things over. These accusations are more serious than usual. Jake nodded. She was right. This was not just another complaint session. This felt organized, planned. The delegates were not just upset about this or that human action. They were upset about humans in general. The Council has made a decision, announced Supreme Arbiter Kalanoff. Her crystal form flashed with bright light and the room went quiet again. We have discussed this matter for many days. We have looked at all the evidence. We have considered all the options. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. This was not going to be good news. Humanity must withdraw from all disputed areas within 6 months, Kalanoff continued. All human trade licenses are cancelled. All human exploration permits are taken away. All human military ships must stay in one system only. We will choose which system. The room was completely silent now. Jake looked around at faces he had known for years. Some of these beings had been his friends. He had shared meals with them, worked with them, helped them solve problems. Now they were all staring at him like he was some kind of dangerous animal. And if we refuse? Jake asked quietly. Then humanity will be declared enemies of the galaxy, Kalanoff said without any emotion in her voice. Your worlds will be surrounded. Your ships will be attacked. Your people will be cut off from all other races. Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. This was not just about trade routes or mining rights. This was about whether humans had the right to exist in the galaxy at all. He looked at Lisa Grant. Her face was pale, but she nodded slightly. He looked at the other humans in his group. Dr. Alan Burke, the science officer, was staring at his hands. Colonel Maria Santos, the military advisor, was standing very straight, but her jaw was tight with anger. They all understood what was happening. The galaxy had decided that humans were too different, too dangerous, too unpredictable. They wanted humans to go back to being small and quiet and unimportant. I see, Jake said. His voice was still calm, but inside he was furious. Thank you for making your position clear. He started to pack up his papers. Every movement was slow and careful. He did not want to give anyone an excuse to say that humans were violent or unpredictable. He would show them dignity even if they showed him none. Ambassador Morrison, called Chancellor Vextari, do you have nothing else to say? No arguments? No threats? Jake stopped and looked at her. For 12 years he had argued with these people. He had explained human actions, defended human choices, and tried to make them understand why humans did what they did. He had written reports, given speeches, and made deals. None of it had mattered. They had never seen humans as equals. They had only seen them as problems to be managed. No, Chancellor, Jake said quietly. We understand perfectly. He walked to the door, followed by his team. The room stayed quiet behind them. Maybe some of the delegates expected him to come back, to beg for another chance, to promise that humans would behave better, but Jake Morrison was done begging. He was done explaining. He was done trying to prove that humans deserved to be part of the galaxy. The door closed behind them with a soft sound. For a moment, Jake stood in the hallway, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked toward the shuttle bay. It was time to go home. It was time to tell Earth what the galaxy really thought of them, and it was time to decide what humans were going to do about it. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Jake Morrison spent most of his time in his small room on the ship, writing reports that would never be sent to the Council. He also looked at files that would soon be locked away forever. Captain Roy Henderson had been flying Jake around the galaxy for 5 years. He was an older man with rough hands and a gruff voice. He had fought in the wars on the outer edge of human space. He knew when politics were about to turn ugly. Sir, we're getting messages from every human colony, said Communications Officer Beth Turner. She was young and always worried about doing her job right. The council sent their demands to everyone. All the colonies know what happened. Jake was not surprised. The council had been quick to tell everyone about their ultimatum. They probably thought humans would panic and beg for mercy. They were wrong. Any messages from Earth? Jake asked. Just one, sir. Top secret. For you only. Jake took the message pad and read it twice. It was from Fleet Admiral Danny Crawford, the highest military officer in human space, and President Rebecca Walsh, the leader of Earth's government. The message was short. We agree with what you did. Starting Protocol 7 right now. Full evacuation approved. Don't contact us after this message. Earth will remember. Protocol 7. Jake had helped write that plan years ago, but he never thought they would use it. It was humanity's final backup plan. If the galaxy ever decided that humans did not belong, humans would leave, all of them. Captain Henderson, Jake said over the ship's radio, change course. We need to go to the Centauri colonies first. We have people to pick up. Over the next 2 months, the galaxy watched as humans began the biggest move in galactic history. It started small. A few ships here, a research station there. But as the weeks went by, everyone began to understand how big this really was. The human colony on Kepler 442b had 12 million people. They were all gone in 10 days. The huge mining operation on Proxima Centauri went dark overnight. The farm worlds in the Tau Ceti system, which had helped feed 3 different alien races during the Great Famine, were empty so fast that not a single human was left behind. Dr. Helen Park ran the colony on Kepler 442b. She had spent 15 years turning that world into a home for humans. Now she was watching as everything was packed up and taken away. Ma'am, said her assistant engineer, Rick Davis. The council sent people to watch us leave. They want to know about the buildings and machines we're leaving behind. Helen looked out at the city she had helped build from nothing. The power plants, the air makers, the food gardens that grew up instead of out. All of it would be left behind. But not the way the council thought. Tell them we're being very careful, she said with a small smile. We want to make sure we don't leave anything behind that belongs to us. The council watchers were confused. They saw humans taking apart not just their machines, but whole sections of buildings. What they did not understand was that humans had learned to build things in a special way. Every important part, every system that made things work, every piece that could not be replaced was made to be moved. When the last human ship left Kepler 442b, the watchers found themselves on a world with beautiful buildings and impressive structures, but nothing worked. The humans had taken the hearts out of everything they had built. What was left looked good but was as useful as expensive decorations. The same thing happened on dozens of worlds. Humans had spent years building colonies, research stations, and factories throughout the galaxy. They had made friends, created trade deals, and become an important part of the galactic economy. Now they were carefully removing themselves from everything. On the industrial world of Ross 128b, plant manager Carl Johnson was shutting down the biggest starship parts factory in the Outer Rim. The plant had been making important parts for 47 different alien races, including several of the council's most powerful members. Sir, said his deputy, engineer Nancy Phillips, we're getting urgent messages from the Crystalline Collective. They're offering to change the council's demands if we'll keep making parts for them. Carl looked at the production schedules on his computer. The collective had ordered engine parts that would not be finished for another 8 months. Without those parts, their entire trade fleet would be stuck on the ground. Tell them to talk to the council, he said. We're just following orders. The collective was not the only one with problems. The Altarians had been getting most of their rare metals from human mines. The Zephyrians had been buying food from human farms. The Aquarians had been using human medical technology to treat their sick. All of it was going away by the end of the 2nd month. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's withdrawal was not temporary. It was not a negotiating trick. It was permanent, and it was being done with the precision of a surgical operation. The humans were not just leaving. They were taking everything with them. Every piece of technology, every bit of knowledge, every person who had ever worked for a human company or studied at a human school. They were removing themselves from the galaxy so completely that it would be as if they had never existed. Commander Zephyros of the Altarian fleet was starting to panic. He had voted for the Council's ultimatum because he thought humans needed to be put in their place. He had never imagined they would actually leave. The humans were providing 73% of our trilithium supplies, his aide reported. Our quantum communication systems will start failing in 4 months. Trilithium was a rare metal that was needed for faster-than-light communication. The humans had been the only ones who knew how to get it out of certain types of planets. Now, that knowledge was gone. Can we find other suppliers? Zephyros asked. No, sir. The humans were the only ones who could do it. The Zephyrians have some supplies, but they want prices that would make us broke. The Zephyrians were having their own problems. Their food system had been built with help from human scientists. The humans had created special crops that could grow in the Zephyrian atmosphere. When the human research stations shut down, they took the genetic templates and growing instructions with them. Chancellor Vextari, who had been one of the loudest voices against human expansion, was now begging the Council for Emergency Food Aid. The humans sabotaged our food systems, she hissed to Supreme Arbiter Kelenoth. They created dependencies on purpose to use as weapons. Kelenoth's crystal form flickered with uncertainty. The humans did everything they promised to do. They just chose not to make new agreements. This is economic warfare, Vextari insisted. They're trying to force us to change our minds, but the humans were not trying to force anything. They were just leaving. The problems kept getting worse. The Aquarians discovered that their ocean worlds had been slowly poisoned by industrial waste for decades. The only reason their people had not died was because of biological filters that human scientists had secretly put in their water systems. When the human maintenance crews disappeared, the filters began to fail. Dr. Kelendra of the Centauri delegation was looking at casualty reports. The human hospitals in the Centauri system had been treating patients from a dozen different races. They handled everything from simple medical care to complex surgeries that no other race knew how to do. The humans were treating 60% of our population for genetic diseases, reported her chief medical officer. Their gene therapy was centuries ahead of ours. The economic problems were huge, but they were only the beginning. As the weeks went by, the Council began to realize that humans had been involved in galactic civilization in ways that no one had understood. The Thrax hegemony had complained about human military buildup. Now they discovered that their entire border defense system depended on human sensor technology. When the human technicians disappeared, their early warning systems went blind. The Skarn are gathering ships near our border, a military coordinator reported. Without the human sensors, we cannot track their movements. The Skarn were a predatory race that had been kept in check by the Council's military. They had noticed the sudden gaps in the galaxy's defenses. They began testing borders. That had been secure for generations, but the most serious problem was one that the Council had never thought about. Humans had been serving as neutral mediators in dozens of ongoing conflicts. With humanity gone, old hatreds began to surface. The Draconian Empire and the Feline Confederation had been in a Cold War for 2 centuries. Human diplomats had kept the peace through careful talks and face-saving compromises. Without that stabilizing influence, both sides began preparing their fleets for war. The galaxy was falling apart, and it was happening faster than anyone had expected. The Council had thought they were getting rid of a troublesome young race. Instead, they had removed the glue that held galactic civilization together, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, 12 billion humans were quietly disappearing into the void, taking with them everything they had learned about making the galaxy work. 3 months after the humans left, the Altarian civilization was dying, not from war or disease, but from something much simpler. Their machines were breaking down. Commander Zephyros stood in the command center of his homeworld, watching, as red warning lights blinked across the control panels. Each light meant another system was failing. Each failure brought his people closer to disaster. "Sir, the quantum communication grid in Sector 7 just went dark," reported his aide. Sub-Commander Veltar. "That's the 15th relay station this week." Zephyros had been so sure that the Council was doing the right thing. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable. They needed to be controlled. He had voted for the ultimatum without hesitation. Now he was watching his entire civilization crumble because of that decision. How long until the main communication network fails completely? He asked. 6 weeks, maybe less, Veltar replied. Without trilithium to repair the relay stations, we'll lose contact with our outer colonies. Our trade networks will collapse. Our military coordination will be impossible. The Altarians had built their advanced society on a foundation of instant communication. Their quantum networks allowed them to coordinate activities across hundreds of star systems. It was what made them one of the most powerful races in the galaxy. But the networks needed trilithium to function, and humans had been their only source of the rare metal. "What about the Zephyrians? Can't they supply us?" Zephyros asked, though he already knew the answer. "They're demanding payment that would bankrupt our entire stellar economy," Veltar said. "They know we're desperate." The Zephyrians were desperate too, but for different reasons. Chancellor Vextari stood in her private chambers, looking out at the vast agricultural complexes that fed her people. The complexes were still there, still impressive to look at. But they were producing nothing. "How many of our people are on emergency rations?" she asked her food coordinator. 2 billion, Chancellor. The hybrid crops that the humans developed are failing across all our agricultural worlds. We don't have the genetic templates to replant them. Vextarius long serpentine body coiled in frustration. The humans had not stolen anything. They had not destroyed anything. They had simply taken their knowledge with them when they left, knowledge that her people had become completely dependent on. "What about synthetic food production?" "We never developed that technology, Chancellor. The human crops were so efficient, but we saw no need to invest in alternatives." That was the problem, Vextari realized. The humans had been so good at solving problems that other races had stopped trying to solve problems themselves. Why develop your own technology when you could just trade with humans for something better? Now those humans were gone and their technology had gone with them. The crisis was spreading faster than anyone had predicted. The Aquarians were facing complete environmental collapse as their water filtration systems failed. The Thrax military was blind without human sensor technology. Even the powerful Crystalline Collective was struggling as their trade fleet sat grounded without spare parts. Dr. Kellendra stood in the main medical center on Centauri Prime, watching as her staff tried to treat patients with equipment they barely understood. The human medical technology was incredibly advanced, but it required constant maintenance and calibration. Without human technicians, the machines were becoming useless pieces of expensive metal. "Doctor, the gene therapy chamber in Ward 6 has shut down again," reported her chief nurse. "That's the 3rd time this week. Can our technicians fix it?" "They're trying, but the human programming is too complex. We don't understand how it works." Calandra felt a cold fear growing in her stomach. The humans had been treating millions of patients across the galaxy for genetic disorders that other races could not cure. Those patients were now facing a slow death as their treatment stopped. "How many patients are we losing?" she asked quietly. 43 so far this week. The number is growing." The humans had not just provided technology. They had provided knowledge, expertise, and solutions to problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries. Now that knowledge was gone, and the galaxy was remembering why those problems had existed in the first place. "Supreme," Arbiter Kellanoth called an emergency session of the Council. The great chamber that had once been filled with confident delegates was now a place of fear and desperation. Representatives who had been allies for centuries were now shouting at each other as their civilizations crumbled. "This is exactly what the humans wanted," hissed Chancellor Vextari. "They created these dependencies on purpose. They wanted to control us." "Control us?" laughed Admiral Torgoth of the Draconian Empire. They could have demanded anything from us and we would have given it to them. Instead, they walked away and left us to die. Maybe that's the point, said Commander Zephyros quietly. Maybe they wanted to show us how much we needed them. Or maybe, said a new voice from the back of the chamber, they just wanted to live. In peace, everyone turned to look at the speaker. It was Lisa Grant, the former human aide who had stayed behind to help coordinate the evacuation of human civilians from mixed-species worlds. She was one of the last humans in the galaxy, and she looked tired and sad. "You have no right to speak here," Vextari hissed. "Your people have betrayed us all." "Betrayed you?" Lisa asked, walking toward the center of the chamber. "How did we?" "Betray you? By following your orders? By accepting your ultimatum? By leaving when you told us to leave? By creating these dependencies?" Counselor Thrax growled. "By making us need you?" Lisa stopped in the middle of the chamber, in the same spot where Jake Morrison had stood 3 months earlier. "We didn't make you need us. You chose to work with us because we offered better solutions. You chose to trade with us because we offered fair deals. You chose to trust us with your problems because we actually solved them. And now you're using that against us," Vextari accused. "We're not using anything against anyone," Lisa replied calmly. "We're gone, we left. We're not coming back. We're not demanding anything from you. We're not threatening you. We're not even talking to you. You wanted us gone, and we're gone." The chamber fell silent. The truth of her words was undeniable. The humans were not attacking the galaxy or holding it hostage. They had simply removed themselves from the equation, and the galaxy was discovering that it could not solve the equation without them. "But people are dying," Dr. Calandra said. "Desperately. Entire civilizations are collapsing. Surely you can understand that we need help." "The same civilizations that voted to exile us 3 months ago?" Lisa asked. "The same people who called us a threat to galactic peace? The same council that told us we didn't belong here?" "We made a mistake," Commander Zephyros admitted. "We were wrong about humans. We were wrong about everything." Lisa looked at him with something that might have been pity. "Yes, you were wrong. But the mistake wasn't about what humans are. The mistake was thinking that you could have the benefits of working with us without actually accepting us as equals." "What do you mean?" Kelenoff asked. "You wanted our technology, but you didn't want our expansion. You wanted our solutions, but you didn't want our methods. You wanted our help, but you didn't want our independence. You wanted us to be useful, but not free." The truth of her words hit the chamber like a physical blow. The Council had never really accepted humanity as an equal partner. They had seen humans as useful servants who needed to be kept in their place. "So what happens now?" Vextari asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Now you learn to solve your own problems," Lisa said. "The way you did before humans came along. The way you should have been doing all along." "But we can't," Dr. Calandra protested. "We don't know how. We've forgotten." "How?" "Then you better learn quickly," Lisa replied. "Because we're not coming back to save you." She turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back at the assembled delegates. "For what it's worth," she said, "we never wanted to be your enemies. We wanted to be your partners. We wanted to help build something better than what came before. But you decided that we were too dangerous to trust and too useful to lose. You can't have it both ways." The door closed behind her with a soft hiss, leaving the council chamber in a silence that seemed to go on forever. Outside, the galaxy continued its slow spiral toward chaos. Wars were breaking out between species that had been at peace for centuries. Trade networks were collapsing as critical links disappeared. Technological systems were failing without the knowledge needed to maintain them, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, humanity continued its quiet journey to a new home, carrying with them the lessons they had learned about the price of trying to help those who did not want to be helped. 6 months had passed since the Council's ultimatum. The galaxy was on fire. Supreme Arbiter Kelenoff stood in the emergency command center that had been built beneath the council chambers. The beautiful meeting room upstairs was now empty most of the time. No one had time for formal debates anymore. They were too busy trying to stop their civilizations from falling apart. "Status report," she said to the room full of military and civilian coordinators. "The Skarn have invaded 6 more systems," reported Admiral Torgoth. His dragon-like face was grim with exhaustion. "Without the human sensor networks, we can't track their fleet movements. They hit us and disappear before we can respond." The Skarn were a warrior race that had been kept in check for decades by the combined military might of the Council. But the Council's military had depended heavily on human technology for coordination and intelligence. Without it, they were fighting. "Blind, what about the draconian feline conflict?" Kelenoth asked. "Getting worse," Torgoth replied. "Both sides are mobilizing everything they have. Queen Seraphina is demanding that we choose sides. High Admiral Whiskers is making the same demand. The Draconian Empire and the Feline Confederation had been enemies for 200 years. Only human diplomats had been able to keep them from going to war. The humans had a gift for finding solutions that let everyone keep their dignity. Without that gift, old hatreds were boiling over. Casualties?" Kelenoth asked, though she dreaded the answer. 7 million dead in the border conflict so far. Civilian populations are fleeing the contested systems. We're looking at the biggest refugee crisis in galactic history. Kelenoth's crystal form dimmed with despair. 7 million beings dead because humans were no longer there to keep the peace. How many more would die before this was over? Any word from the search teams? She asked. "Nothing," reported Dr. Calandra, who was coordinating the desperate hunt for humanity. "We've sent probes to every system within 1,000 light years. We've monitored every communication frequency. We've even tried sending messages to empty space, hoping they might hear us." The search for humanity had become an obsession for many council members. Surely 12 billion people could not just disappear. Surely there had to be some trace, some clue, some way to find them. "What about beyond the galactic rim?" Kelenoth asked. "The few probes we sent in that direction were destroyed or lost," Calandra said. "We don't know what's out there, but it's not safe for our technology." Commander Zephyros, who had become the unofficial leader of the Find the Humans project, looked up from his data screens. "I think we're looking at this wrong," he said. "We're assuming they went somewhere specific. What if they're not anywhere we can reach?" "What do you mean?" "I've been studying human history," Zephyros explained. "They're the only race I know of that has ever moved their entire civilization. When they left their original star system to explore the galaxy, they didn't just send out colony ships. They moved their whole society. They did it once before. They could do it again. Move to where?" Kelenoth asked. "Another galaxy," Zephyros said quietly. "Somewhere completely outside our reach." The idea sent a chill through the room. If humans had left for another galaxy, they were truly gone forever. The nearest galaxy was millions of light years away, even with the fastest ships in the Council fleet. It would take thousands of years to reach it. "That's impossible," protested Chancellor Vextari, who had arrived during the briefing. "No race has that kind of technology." "Humans do," Zephyros said. "They've always been better at long-distance travel than the rest of us. Remember, they spread across our galaxy in just 200 years. Most races take thousands of years to establish even a few dozen colonies, but to travel between galaxies would require exactly the kind of planning and preparation that humans excel at," Zephyros finished. "Think about how they left our galaxy. Everything was coordinated down to the smallest detail. Every ship, every person, every piece of equipment was accounted for. That kind of operation takes years to plan." The implications were staggering. If Zephyros was right, then humans had been planning their departure long before the Council's ultimatum. They had seen this day coming and prepared for it. "How long do you think they were planning this?" Kelenoth asked. "Probably since they first joined the galactic community," Zephyros replied. "Humans always have backup plans. It's how they survived as a young race in a galaxy full of older, more powerful civilizations, while the Council struggled to understand what had happened." To humanity, the galaxy continued to tear itself apart. The economic collapse had triggered a cascade of failures that seemed to have no end on Altarian Prime. The lights were going out, literally, the power grid that had supplied energy to billions of people was failing as the quantum generators broke down without human-made parts. "How long until total grid failure?" asked High Chancellor Morthic. 3 weeks, maybe less," replied his chief engineer. "We're cannibalizing generators from the outer colonies to keep the homeworld running, but it's only buying us time." The Altarians had never learned to build their own quantum generators. They had always bought them from humans, who made them better and cheaper than anyone else. Now those generators were dying and the knowledge of how to fix them was gone on Zephyrian worlds. The food riots were getting worse. Chancellor Vextaria's people were starving as their agricultural systems continued to fail. The emergency food shipments from other worlds were not enough to feed 3 billion people. "The synthetic food plants are running at maximum capacity," reported her agricultural minister. "But they can only produce basic nutrients. People are getting sick from malnutrition." "What about the emergency crops we planted?" "Total failure. Without the human genetic templates, we can't create anything that will grow in our atmosphere. We're completely dependent on imports now." The irony was bitter. The Zephyrians had been one of the most self-sufficient races in the galaxy before they started working with humans. Human agricultural technology had allowed them to triple their population and eliminate hunger. Now that technology was gone and they could not even feed the people they had before. The Aquarians were facing an even worse crisis. Their ocean worlds were slowly being poisoned as the biological filters failed. The elegant underwater cities that had been marvels of engineering were becoming death traps. "Evacuation of the deep cities is 60% complete," reported Marine Coordinator Flavesh. "But we have nowhere to put the refugees. The surface platforms can't support this. Many people." The Aquarians had built their entire civilization around the assumption that their water would always be clean. The human biofilters had been invisible, working quietly in the background to process industrial waste and maintain the delicate ocean ecosystem. Without them, centuries of accumulated pollution were finally catching up. Dr. Kellendra stood in her medical center, looking at casualty reports from across the galaxy. The numbers were getting worse every day, not just from the wars, but from the medical crisis that was spreading as human treatments became unavailable. "How many patients have we lost this week?" she asked her staff. 437. "On Centauri Prime alone," replied her chief medical officer. "Galaxy-wide, we estimate at least 50,000 deaths from treatment interruption. 50,000 people dead because their medicine had come from human doctors who were no longer there. And this was just the beginning. As more patients went, without treatment, the death toll would climb into the millions." "Any progress on reverse engineering the human medical technology?" "Very little. Their programming is incredibly sophisticated. It would take us decades to understand it, assuming we could understand it at all." That was the cruelest part of the whole crisis. The humans had not taken their technology away out of spite. They had simply built it in a way that required human knowledge to operate. Without that knowledge, the galaxy's most advanced medical systems were just expensive furniture. As the crisis deepened, some council members began to talk about the unthinkable. Maybe it was time to admit that they had made a terrible mistake. Maybe it was time to beg humanity to come back, but first, they had to find them, and as each day passed with no sign of human ships, no response to their desperate messages, no hope of contact, the terrible truth began to sink in. The humans were really gone. They had walked away from an entire galaxy, taking with them everything that had made galactic civilization work. They had left behind a galaxy that was slowly, but inevitably sliding toward darkness, and the worst part was that it was all the Council's fault. 5 years had passed since the humans walked away. The galaxy was a much darker place now. Supreme Arbiter Kalanoth stood in what used to be the Great Council Chamber. Half the seats were empty. Some species had withdrawn from the Council entirely, unable to afford the costs of membership. Others had been conquered by stronger neighbors. A few had simply gone extinct, The beautiful chamber that had once buzzed with confident debates was now quiet and cold. The walls no longer changed colors. The air recycling system worked poorly. Even basic maintenance had become difficult without human technology. "Status report," Kalanoth said to the handful of delegates who still attended the meetings. "The Skarn have conquered 12 more systems," reported Admiral Torgoth wearily. His once proud appearance was now haggard and scarred. "The Altarian. Resistance collapsed last week. Commander Zephyros died defending their last colony." Kalanoth felt a pang of sadness. Zephyros had spent his final years trying to understand humans, trying to find them, trying to bring them back. He had died still believing that the galaxy could be saved if only they could find humanity. What about the Zephyrian situation? "Chancellor, Vextari is requesting emergency evacuation assistance. Their homeworld can no longer support life. The agricultural collapse is complete." The proud Zephyrian chancellery, which had ruled hundreds of worlds for thousands of years, was now reduced to a few refugee ships fleeing their dying planets. Vextari, who had once hissed about human aggression, was now begging for help to save her people. And the medical crisis. "Getting worse," said Dr. Calandra. She looked old now, older than her actual age. Years of watching patients die from diseases that humans could have cured had taken their toll. "We estimate 300 million deaths galaxy-wide from medical treatment interruption. The genetic therapy patients were the first to go, but now even basic medical procedures are failing. 300 million dead. That was more than the population of many worlds. All because the galaxy had lost access to human medical knowledge." "Any word from the deep space monitoring stations?" Kalanoth asked, though she already knew the answer. "Nothing. No signs of human activity anywhere in this galaxy. No response to our emergency broadcasts? No indication that they even know what's happening here." The humans had vanished so completely that some of the younger generation had begun to doubt they had ever existed. The empty colonies, the abandoned space stations, the silent communication networks could have been left by any advanced civilization that had decided to move on, but the older beings remembered. They remembered first contact with the small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. They remembered the rapid expansion of human civilization, the wars they had fought together, the crises they had weathered as allies. Some of them had begun to understand what they had truly lost. Admiral Torgoth had become something of a historian in his spare time. He had spent years studying human culture, their methods, their way of thinking. He had come to conclusions that made him wake up at night in a cold sweat. "They were never trying to conquer the galaxy," he reported to what remained of the Draconian High Command. "They were trying to understand it. Every colony they built, every trade agreement they made, every conflict they mediated was part of a larger learning process." "What were they learning?" asked Queen Seraphina. She was old now, too, her once magnificent scales dulled by years of war and hardship. "How to survive," Torgoth replied. "They were the youngest race in the galaxy, but they were also the most adaptable. They learned from everyone, took the best ideas from every civilization they met, and made it all work together." The dragons, like most species, had developed their technology and culture in isolation, perfecting their own unique approaches to life's challenges. Humans had done something different. They had become a living synthesis of galactic civilization, combining the best elements of dozens of different races into something entirely new. "And now that knowledge is lost," Queen Seraphina said sadly. "Not lost," Torgoth corrected. "Gone. They took it with them when they left." Meanwhile, far beyond the edge of the Milky Way, humanity had indeed found a new home. The Andromeda Galaxy was younger than their old home, less crowded, full of opportunities for a race that had learned to adapt and survive. Jake Morrison, now in his 70s, served as the first president of the Human Colonial Federation. He stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching human ships move between the stars of their new galaxy. The past 5 years had been challenging, but humanity had thrived in their new home. "Any messages from the old galaxy?" asked his aide Beth Turner, who had stayed with him through all the years of exile. The usual, Jake replied, watching a colony ship depart for a distant star system. Desperate pleas for help, offers of friendship, promises that things will be different this time. Nothing we haven't heard before. The messages had started coming about 2 years after the Exodus. At first, they had been demands that humanity return and fulfill their obligations. Then they had become offers of better terms. Now they were just desperate cries for help from a galaxy that was slowly dying. "Do you think we'll ever go back?" Beth asked. Jake was quiet for a long time, watching as construction crews worked on a new space dock. Everything here was built with the lessons they had learned in the Milky Way. The technology was better, the systems more efficient, the society more resilient. "That depends," he said finally, "on whether they've learned anything. And if they haven't, then they'll have to solve their own problems. We offered to help once. They told us we weren't welcome. We're not going to make that mistake again." It was true. The humans had not left in anger or spite. They had left because they finally understood that they would never truly belong in the Milky Way. The other races would always see them as outsiders, as threats to be controlled rather than partners to be respected. So they had taken their knowledge, their technology, their hard-won wisdom about how to make different species work together, and they had gone somewhere else. They had found a galaxy where they could apply everything they had learned without having to constantly justify their existence. The Andromeda Galaxy had its own challenges. There were aggressive species here too, ancient conflicts, seemingly impossible problems. But humanity approached them with the confidence of a race that had learned to thrive. In impossible situations, they had made contact with 17 different species so far. Instead of demanding submission or offering conditional friendship, they had simply asked, "What do you need? And how can we work together?" The results had been remarkable. Wars that had raged for centuries were ended through careful mediation. Trade networks that had been disrupted by mistrust were rebuilt on foundations of mutual benefit. Species that had been enemies for generations learned to see each other as potential partners. It was the same gift that humans had brought to the Milky Way, but here it was appreciated rather than feared. Here, when humans suggested a better way of doing things, other species listened. When humans offered to share their technology, it was seen as generosity rather than manipulation. Back in the Milky Way, the slow collapse continued. The galaxy that had once been home to hundreds of thriving civilizations was now a shadow of its former self. Some species had adapted to the new reality and found ways to survive. Others had simply faded away. The council still existed, but it was a pale shadow of what it had once been. The great chamber that had once held representatives from 47 different worlds now hosted meetings of perhaps a dozen species on a good day. Supreme Arbiter Kelenoth, now ancient even by crystal standards, spent her time reviewing historical records and wondering what might have been. She had been one of the architects of humanity's exile. She had believed that the galaxy would be better off without their disruptive influence. She had been wrong about everything. "Arbiter," said her aide one day, "we've received another transmission from the direction of Andromeda." Kelenoth's crystalline form brightened slightly. "From the humans?" "Yes, Arbiter. It's addressed to the council." Kelenoth felt something she had not experienced in years: hope. The message was brief and formal. It came from someone called President Elizabeth Morrison Chun, identifying herself as a representative of the Human Colonial Federation. "To the peoples of the Milky Way galaxy," the message began, "we are the descendants of the humans who once lived among you. We have built a new civilization in Andromeda, one based on cooperation, respect, and shared prosperity. We have not forgotten the lessons we learned in your galaxy, both the good and the bad. We have helped prevent 3 wars here, established trade relationships with multiple species, and created lasting peace between former enemies. We send this message not to gloat or to demand apologies, but to let you know that we have found our place among the stars. We hope that you have found yours. The door between our galaxies remains open, should you ever wish to learn from each other as equals. Until then, we wish you well." The message ended there. No demands, no conditions, no threats. Just a simple acknowledgement that both galaxies existed and that perhaps someday they might find a way to coexist. Kelenoth read the message several times. It was so very human. Even after everything that had happened,